President Joe Biden has described his first 1 year in office as a year of challenges as he addressed both domestic and international issues at a press conference held to mark his inauguration a year ago. We have details in this report.
U.S. President Joe Biden, in a rare news conference on Wednesday afternoon to mark his 1-year anniversary, uses the platform to call on Americans to be patient in the fight against COVID-19 and defend his record of success despite middling poll numbers.
Inflation is up.
President Biden spends the first 15 minutes of the presser delivering a speech, much of it centered on his administration's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the disputes and controversies around his Build Back Better bill.
The bottom line on COVID-19 is that we're in a better place than we've been and have been thus far, clearly better than a year ago. We're not going back to lockdowns. We're not going back to closing schools. Schools should stay open, because the American Rescue Plan, we provided to states $130 billion. $130 billion to keep our students and educators safe and schools open.
In his response to international issues, the U.S. president thinks his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, will move in on Ukraine but does not want full-blown war. He says Mr. Putin will pay a, quote, serious and dear price for invading, but indicated a minor incursion might be treated differently.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia if they further invade Ukraine, and that our allies and partners are ready to impose severe cost and significant harm on Russia and the Russian economy.
It will be recalled that Russia has some 100,000 troops near the border but denies planning an invasion. President Putin has made a series of demands to the West, insisting Ukraine is never allowed to join NATO and that the defensive alliance abandons military activity in Eastern Europe. Talks between the West and Russia have so far failed to reach a breakthrough, with some of Moscow's demands rejected as non-starters. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to meet the Russian Foreign Minister in Geneva on Friday, having warned that Russia could attack Ukraine, quote, on very short notice.
It has definitely been a controversial 1 year in office for the U.S. President Joe Biden. And to discuss his leadership so far, I am now being joined virtually by President Emeritus, Corporate Council on Africa, Stephen Hayes. Good to have you join us.
Thank you. It's good to be back again.
So President Biden was sworn in under extraordinary circumstances. We saw what happened with the insurrection, and just 2 weeks after the insurrection, he was sworn in. He was sworn in with about 56% approval rating, but as of today, some polls will put him at about 42%, other lesser, about 37 or 38%. Why do you think that President Biden quickly moved from that 56% approval rating to the point now where he's so unpopular in America?
Well, I wouldn't call it necessarily unpopular. I think he's still regarded well as a person. I think the speed of which the policies and the changes has taken place has been very slow, and therefore I think that's the reason for his lower poll ratings. Poll ratings go up and down. I think, frankly, the polls now are accurate. I think that his popularity as a president, or his regard as a president, is down. He's got now 3 years to get it back up. Polls go up and down, and we'll see. But I think it's a time to not overreact. But yes, the bottom line, polls are down. I think that's an accurate reflection of a lot of the questions that most of the country has.
And let's talk about that speech he made on the day of the inauguration day, which was January 20th last year. He, like we said, he came under a very divided America under President Donald Trump. and perhaps that's why a lot of people voted for him. He had the highest vote in terms of popularity. But when he said he was going to work to bring unity back to America, he was going to heal America. But when you look at America today, would you say America is more united or polarized under the Biden administration?
I think the polarization is about the same as when he came in. I don't think there's been a great change. This country is badly divided on any number of issues, and it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be an overnight fix on that. It's going to take a long time because in Senate, the senators on both parties aren't really talking to each other much. There's an open contempt. When you have that also washes down to the rest of the country. And so I think it's going to be very difficult. I think the president underestimated the division in the country, and I think that often happens when you live on the East Coast and you fail to understand what's happening in Middle America and the rest of the country. And I think that's what goes on in Washington quite a bit. It's going to take time to put this country back together, and it's not an automatic put back together either. It's going to take a lot of diplomacy. It's going to take a lot of good, positive programs, and I think the confidence of the American people has to be rebuilt.
And you mentioned Congress. The dynamics is different with President Biden, because with President Barack Obama, it was the Republicans who had a problem with his policies. But when you look at President Biden, it is not just Republicans; it is also members of his own party. There are Democrats who have a problem, who had a problem with the infrastructure bill, even though he ended up passing that bill. And there are those who are saying the Build Back Better plan is just a bit too much. Maybe it should be scaled down in bits, and he has agreed to do that. Do you think that the fact that he's also having a problem with members of his own party who believe he has gone just way left might also have been a challenge for President Biden?
Yes, I've always been troubled by the terms right and left, but nevertheless, you're absolutely right. The Democratic Party is also split between a progressive element that wants more emphasis on domestic matters, the closing the gap between the very rich and the rest of the country as well. But I think that the Democratic Party is part of his problem as well. He doesn't have a united party. He has two in the Senate. He has two senators who vote more Republican than do Democrat. So he doesn't really have a real majority in Congress. I think the other problem that the president has is that he still sees the Senate as being similar to when he was there, when there was a collegial working relationship across the board. That just simply doesn't exist any longer.
And we've been talking about his domestic agenda, but let's talk about President Biden, his international, his foreign policy. His foreign policy record as it stands isn't really a great one because of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. He's also now battling with the Russia-Ukraine crisis. How would you rate him or assess President Biden when it comes to his foreign policy so far?
I would give him a C. On one hand, you're right. The Afghanistan withdrawal was, I think, viewed as a humiliation and disaster in this country and frankly around the rest of the world. I think he's been very slow in rebuilding relationships. I say a C and not anything worse, because on the other hand, he has gotten the U.S. back into the international arena. Not that the same degree of confidence in this country exists around the world now, and that's going to be a strong uphill climb as well. He inherited quite a mess. Internationally, the discussion yesterday on Ukraine was also, I think, filled with gaffes, particularly, and he's got to do some damage control on how that was handled as well. He calls for consultations with his allies. The consultations haven't taken place at times before a decision is made here. And I think that we've got to realize that the United States needs to be more a world player again, and that means listening to others and consulting before making decisions. As far as policy on Africa, I think that it's certainly better than the last 4 years under President Trump. There was no policy. But at the same time, there's been I think it's been very, very slow to enunciate and define a policy towards Africa as well.
All right. The midterms are coming. We'll see how all of this play out in the midterms in November. We'll also see how he continues to push through the domestic and foreign policy record. Thank you so much for talking to us, as always. The President Emeritus, Corporate Council on Africa, Stephen Hayes.
Thanks for the opportunity again, too.